question there?
Question, comment. I just wanted to say that I really agree with what the gentleman said about meeting a person of a different faith or race or whatever is a good way of breaking down the ice. I think in a lot of ways, one factor is there's an insecurity within ourselves that prevents us from extending above those boundaries that we've set. In some ways, we get defensive and guarded about what we hold dear. So if we look investigating in ourselves what makes us happy, or what we're confident in that, and we realize that that's not really being attacked or confronted, then it makes it easier to break down the walls that we build between us and other things that we don't know very well.
That's a generous sentiment. I believe that to be exactly true. Thank you for sharing that.
Hello, my name is Hassan Sadiq. I'm the Arabic teacher at the University of Idaho. Before asking the question, I'm going to give you a good example. I've asked my students to go through the internet and get an article about Islam, either from American newspaper or European, and by the next day I've got 23 articles. I started discussing with them. I said, okay, how many positive articles about Islam? Okay. It was only one, and it was written by a Muslim. So, don't you think that the media is controlling the whole thing?
Yes, I've been doing a lot of web searching the past week for this event tonight, and I was amazed. Google must have arranged it such that all the anti-Muslim stuff was on the first page. Maybe they've paid to be on the first page. But I was, one of the connections that I wanted to research was what was the American mood about Islam during the first war that we had with the Islamic world. That is when we were at war with the Barbary pirates. And I haven't finished my research, but I'm sure that there was some anti-Muslim sentiment, but a lot of things that I found was that at that time, Americans were able to separate pirates who happened to be Muslims, that is terrorists, and Islam. They were able to separate those things in their mind. What is really tragic today is that for many Americans, the two have been merged. But I was trying to research that connection, Barbary pirates and American opinion at the time. And all of it was anti-Islamic. One of the arguments you'll probably hear on Fox News is that Jefferson was in London. He was Secretary of State at the time, and they were trying to negotiate with the Barbary pirates. And it is a sort of quotation by Jefferson lifted out of context about how the Quran somehow said that if you are a Muslim nation, it was your duty to conquer everyone and subdue everyone. And the conclusion that some of these people drew was that that was Jefferson's view of Islam, which is totally false, of course.
In further response to what you're saying, as far as the media is concerned, there's some studies up there. The media is almost at the service of the larger ballgame. In other words, they are the politicians. They are some of these rather, what I would call, extreme fundamentalists in this country, not far different from those we find in the Islamic world. Almost the same category. Rather rabid Christian evangelicals, John Hagee and Franklin Graham and Pat Robertson and a few others. Forgive me if some of you are their followers. So they kind of feed upon each other, along with the media almost nourishes on all that coming from the different groups. And there are some other organizations, well-funded organizations in the country who have this mission to promote Islamophobia or whatever. And there are now, any longer, there are quite a number of people like Pam Geller and there are two converts from Islam to Christianity who are making a lot of money giving speeches. $15,000 a dollar. And, try as bad as you can to put down Islam and Muslims, you make more money. Okay? So media is almost at this service, the mainstream media is almost at this service of this entire wave.
But Sarah Palin is blaming the mainstream media as well. Maybe the media is just feeding all of us just what we want to eat.
It's a market economy. It's a market economy, so whatever will sell.
I'm sure that journalism students that might be in here can tell you that the defunding of bureaus and resources to do research has made the media a lot more likely to be the press release for whoever is paying the greatest amount of money. And the niche marketing that I love the internet, it's my life, but it also feeds me exactly what I want to find, and does not force me to spend a whole lot of time on those pages that offend me. So I go looking for what I want to read, and I'm not challenged by some other presumably objective resource that shakes my worldview.
I appreciated the comments this evening, and I suspect we all basically agree. We're tolerant, we deplore Islamophobia, but I'm disappointed that we have this sugar-coated presentation. Every person here is of the same opinion. I find it more enlightening to have discussions with people with other views. I like to argue with my conservative Republican students. I don't agree with them, but I like to hear their view. And a few weeks ago, for example, on Newsweek, the cover of the magazine showed a picture of a young woman whose husband had cut off her nose and ears. Now, no thinking person would think this represents the whole Muslim world, but it did represent a significant number of people I think in Pakistan. And I've had lots of Islamic students. And when I taught a couple of years ago in California, I was reasonably active in the Islamic Student Society. And I have personal friends who are Muslims who are just as upstanding and righteous as you could find. Ghazi and I share many common views. But in order to understand the roots of this Islamophobia, you have to face up to some facts. For example, a few years ago, Time magazine had a spread about terrorists. And they showed pictures of 150 terrorists. What do you think they looked like? They weren't 80-year-old grandmas or 9-year-old kids. They were males, looked Middle Eastern, were between 20 and 40 years of age, had facial hair. They looked like terrorists. I could spot them. And I think to say, well, that's unfair profiling is short-sighted. You have to recognize, I think, that people like this underwear bomber and this kid the other day who tried to blow up people, some of those people do really bad things, and you have to recognize, so that isn't every Muslim. After all, the most populous Muslim country is Indonesia. You don't hear of any terrorists from Indonesia. They're basically the Middle Eastern terrorists. And it's less than 1% of Muslims. So you can't blame the whole Muslim community, particularly Americans, for this. But it's foolish not to recognize that. The homophobia that many people that I've talked to, that they exhibit, results from these horrible things. You look, I would like a discussion, for example, of how women are treated in Muslim countries. They don't have the same idea of equal rights or human rights that we do. This stoning people to death for adultery and chopping off people's hands, those are not consistent with Western values.
They're in the
And
Bible.
It's foolish to just simply ignore all this, sugarcoat it and say, oh, Islam is a wonderful religion. I don't think that will really help very much doing that.
Excuse me.
Mike, I fully share, sympathize with what you're saying. Absolutely. I hope that can be a topic for another social justice forum. Today we are talking about a problem that we encounter in the United States called Islamophobia. Now, still I'll add to what you said. In the last few days, I'm signing petitions, sending notes with respect to a minority Christian woman in Pakistan who, for some false charges, have been accused for defaming Islam, and she's in jail. Okay, there are all kind of protests going on in Pakistan. That this is garbage, this is nonsense, this is absolutely contrary to the Islamic scriptures. Similarly, this chopping of the nose and so forth is appalling. For most of it, it is appalling. It is in the name of Islam, you know, female honor and so forth. Like also, you know, good I know how women, some are you know, domestic violence and so on, what happened to women here. But that is in the name of Islam as they preach it over there. I understand fully what you're saying, and it is appalling to see some of those things. But it is abuse of Islam, not Islam itself. It is absolutely abuse of Islam. Nowhere in the scripture that you will find any justification for these things. Nowhere. Chopping of hands and so forth. You hear about it all the time. So I want to separate that from the practice which I personally, and lots of Muslims, find absolutely disgusting. I fully share what you're saying. And I'm also acting on those by way of sending letters and petitions. You know, in some countries there's an anti-blasphemy law, like in Pakistan. If anybody says something critical about the Prophet, all right, this and this is going to happen to you. Right now, there's such a huge movement in Pakistan to nullify those laws. Those laws were, in Pakistan, were put together by who? By our man in Pakistan, whose name was Ziaul Haq. Our man, who was fighting the Russians, who introduced extreme Islamism in Pakistan. He was our man. He introduced it. Also some of these Taliban. You know, the Taliban were created by us. They were created by us. All the time, in fact, last year, Hillary Clinton kind of apologized for that. Now, look, we did all that during the revolution, when Pakistan was fighting a proxy war for us against the Russians, and we were training the Taliban. So they were called Mujahideens at that time. In fact, I have some pictures. They were sitting with Ronald Reagan, and Ronald Reagan is welcoming them with a warm hand, introducing them to the Congress. And they're later on the bad guys. You know, they are not the bad guys. We were training them to be as extreme as possible so that they can fight godless communism. So there's a kind of background to so many of things. I'm not saying they are okay. But there's a huge background to all of that. We were training, especially since World War II. There's a book on that. And the book's name is The Devil's Game, written by Dreyfus, not Robert or Richard, one is the actor and one is the author. The Devil's Game, how we funded extremism in the post-World War II.
Ghazi, I think you miss an important point. I don't defend the United States. I'm extremely critical of what happened in Vietnam and what has happened in the Middle East. The U.S. is wrong in many, many cases. But that does not address the question of these jihads and in general, in the Middle Eastern Islamic countries, they do not share our Western values of democracy and human rights. They do not treat women in what I would consider a good way. And if you look at a country like Saudi Arabia, way worse dictatorship than Iraq or Iran, but they have a lot of oil, so somehow.
They are our people, our guys.
So, I mean, it needs to address the fact that some of these things, ranging from chopping off people's noses and other things, that generates some of this Islamophobia. So when you're skinning yourself, and most,
Well, I appreciate
most
your
of these
points.
terrorists
We're
are
going to be
members
running out of time,
Right.
and we had some other questions. And as a Roman Catholic Christian, I too would want to talk about the decadent side and the horrible side of Christianity in this country. A Christian that is a white supremacist that takes, say, Mr. Larry Bird and ties him to the back of a truck a few years back and runs him down the road in the name of a Christ that I do not worship. And I would also say that the Ku Klux Klan that wears a Christ of a Jesus I do not worship in the name of their version of Christianity, it's very similar. I think we had a question or a comment back here. Does anybody? I thought I saw a hand up over there. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, when they were talking about the media, we actually went over this in one of my classes, and that's exactly what the media does, is they play on fear, because fear sells better than the opposite, calming people down, and you make more money by publicizing fear than you do publicizing everyday events, and that's why they show so much horror on, like, the news even, is because they make more money at it.
And I think also it just mirrors to this whole war on terror, which is, to use the old term, feeds the military-industrial complex. So I think this gets back to one of Gaz's first points in some ways. It's sort of like this new crusade we have. I mean, I think it's nice to think that there will be a power shift, generationally and whatever, but I think we underestimate the control of the power elite and the military and establishment in our country that keeping power partly by keeping us in the state of terror. The point that a kind of general point that I made is this, kind of also ties together with the point that Mike made. Last year I was on a 1 month invitation to give seminar and so forth. One of the things I was mentioning there to students over here, and I was doing very cautiously, politely, that look, the Islamic world gave Europe Enlightenment, Renaissance, and even Reformation. No question about that. This is what I call our civilization here is Judeo-Christian and Islamic civilization. No question. All right. Having said that, I make a point here and there, the Islamic world facilitated Europe's exit out of the Dark Ages. Clearly, absolutely. Okay. But now, this is what I point out making to my Muslim friends. Where are you guys? Now you guys are in the Dark Ages. That was the point I was making here. Now, what the heck is going wrong with you guys? Now that is another question why all of this happened. Recently, Graham Fuller wrote a book. Just he was on PBS or something a few days ago. Graham Fuller, A World Without Islam. Would the Middle East and the rest of the world would be the same as we see today? His answer was, no, even if there were some other kind of Christian in the Middle East, even if there were Buddhists over there or Hindus, the situation on that part of the world will still be the same. Why? Then we shared on the PBS. This is my favorite bumper sticker for the car will be. History did not begin with 9/11.
We have time for, I think there was someone standing at the back. Did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that this country was founded on religious freedom, principles of religious freedom. We did that because there had been religious persecution for a long time. We've taken large steps towards having equality for all human beings in this country. We have a government founded on human rights, the principles of human rights. One of the neat ways to see how far we have come is to go to a foreign country where those things don't happen. One of the really great things about Americans is we can criticize ourselves, we can lay into ourselves when we're wrong, we can take the blame, and all of those things. I don't think there's many Americans that would actually choose to be xenophobic. All that said, 9/11 happened, and I also got curious about Islam. I picked up the Quran, I read it, I read into various people, and Islam is different. Islam's foundations have hardwired into them some really tough stuff. Now, I'm not saying that Christianity doesn't as well, but Islam is different and needs to be treated differently. This panel has stepped around the real problems like it was an elephant in the room that nobody wanted to talk about. The fact is, if it wasn't for Islam, we could go to an airport, buy a ticket, get on an airplane, and go. It is a problem, and it's a big and growing problem, and it's at the foundation of Islam. If you read the Quran, the first words are, these words are not to be doubted. Now, there's other translations that try to make it sound softer. And if you read, the Quran is a good book to read if you want to learn how to be an atheist. It was for me, anyway. These are big issues. We're all being happy, cheerful. Let's be loving. I agree. My fellow human beings deserve all the rights that I have. But Islam and Islamic countries don't subscribe to human rights. In fact, when they have a choice, a lot of times they say, what are we doing? We don't want fees. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
I'll give you another reading list sometime if you want to. Reading list sometime.
We have some other panelists
Yeah,
that
okay.
would like to reply.
Right.
Who first?
Yeah, Ralph,
I will make these-
I just have to strongly disagree with you. Islam is not different. It is completely integral to the Judeo-Christian tradition. I love this idea that Jews, Christians, and Muslims are people of the book singular. The Quran is simply an extension of the Abrahamic.
The Quran
And you can read the Bible.
purports itself
you
to
know this,
be the Word of God.
That's how the
The
Bible. That's how the Bible
last
is.
Word of God. And Muhammad is his prophet. There are none after.
You have Christian preachers that say exactly the same thing.
Have you read the
You're not-
Quran?
You're not making your point very well. You're a fundamental.
I don't.
We are searched at
Look,
airports
I don't
because
care.
of
I don't care.
Muslim militants, not Islam. Islam is not stopping us at the airport. A very small minority of terrorists.
I don't care if anybody believes my point. But if you do want some insight into this, go to the Quran, read the Quran. Go to the life of Muhammad and read the life of Muhammad. These are the foundations on which that's
You're
built.
proving his thesis.
Okay, by the way, I've noticed that tonight it's mainly men that have been doing the talking and the broad generalizations. Could we hear from some sisters?
I just, and then to you, I just want to point out that I don't know if there are any Native American people here, but I really feel compelled to say that for Native people, this is ground zero. We tend to often forget this, but Native people have been absolutely most cruelly assaulted, and centuries later they're still trying to recover from the assault of colonialism, much of which comes from a Christian background. And so we really must be careful to really look at all these different religions and how the ideologies and behaviors that sometimes grow out of these religions, because I feel so strongly that if you work and you know Native people, you will understand that they're still trying to recover from a terrible terrorist assault on their cultures.
But I completely agree. One thing we must consider when we look at Islam is Christians have done the exact same thing throughout history. We have regularly assaulted other cultures and persecuted people. But what happens is it only takes a small group to ruin things for the whole and make people believe things that aren't true about a group like, say, Islam. One of my most favorite quotes that I had ever heard from I think it was a Muslim scholar, you might agree with this, and it was, if you take the life of one person, one innocent person in Islam, that is the equivalent of taking all the lives on the planet.
That's in the Quran.
Yes, in the Quran.
It was paraphrased.
I've already commented, I know we're running out of time, but I just want to bring it back to the point that this meeting tonight, as I understood, was talking about Islamophobia in the United States. And it seems like what some of the points have been made was kind of going at attacking different points of like Christianity or different points of religions, trying to compare and realize that there is a problem. We know there's a problem, but the thing we should be trying to do is try to inspire, try to figure out a way of what we can do within our small community in Moscow and Pullman to increase this, this awareness that there is a problem here and that we need to overcome it together as a community. So that's why I think that this panel, this conversation tonight that we've been doing is kind of trying to target that Islamophobia, and that's what this is supposed to be about.
This is obviously a topic that engenders lots of opinions, and all opinions are valid, and all voices are important, and the dialogue absolutely has to continue. We're a little bit over time. I know we're snowing that. We're going to go ahead and call it a bit. The panelists are weaker. If folks want to come up, we have some more refreshments. Please help yourselves. And we especially want to say thank you, and thank you to especially the gentlemen who were brave enough to also speak up.